Assalamu alaikum students, a very good morning to you all. I hope you all are fine and doing well. This is a very difficult time for all of us because of COVID. Due to social distancing, we can't meet with our relatives, our friends, and we are under a lot of psychological pressure, I know. But if you're having any kind of issue, any kind related to your studies or some other problem, you can always reach out to us. We are all ears and we'll always be there to help you out. But please don't keep your issues to yourself. I know this is a new method of teaching and it would be difficult for you to understand it as well. It is difficult for us to make the lectures as well, and we are trying our level best to make them easy to understand. But if you're having any issue, you are always welcome to contact us and discuss it with us. Okay? You should discuss your problems with the person you're most comfortable with, and inshallah all the issues will be resolved and this time will soon pass, inshallah. But we are bound and we have to finish the syllabus in time, so we have to keep the pace. Okay, but if you have any problems, you are most welcome to discuss it with us. So you are done with general pharmacology, and today we'll be starting the pharmacology of autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system is the foundation of pharmacology, and as you know, if the foundation of a building is weak, it will fall down. So you have to understand it really well. You have to make a clear concept of autonomic nervous system. You have done it in anatomy and physiology as well, and its anatomy and physiology really play a major role in understanding its pharmacology. If you have a sound knowledge of the anatomy and physiology of autonomic nervous system, then only you would be able to understand its pharmacology. So today we'll be discussing the introduction, and in that too we'll keep our focus to parasympathetic nervous system only, and sympathetic nervous system will be uh, studied on later. So let's get started. I want you to gear up your energies and stay focused. It would be easier to understand, and try to make a concept. Just don't remember each and everything. You have to make a concept of autonomic nervous system. And you know the drill of pharmacology lecture. You have to keep a notebook by your side and you have to write down the important points that are being told to you, because we can't write each and everything on the slide. So please note down the important points. Let's get started. So let's check out the learning objectives for today's session. By the end of today's lecture, you should have a knowledge of autonomic nervous system anatomy, and you should be able to describe the steps in the synthesis, storage, release, and termination of action of acetylcholine, and name the drugs or substances that block each step as well. Enumerate the cholineceptors, give their location and signaling mechanisms, and describe the organ system effects of stimulation of parasympathetic system. These two are very important university questions as well. You can get this question in your exam as describe the steps with the help of a diagram. So you should be able to draw it as well. And the types of receptors, their location and signaling mechanisms is very important to understand the actions of parasympathetic nervous system and to understand the actions of the drugs which mimic the action of parasympathetic nervous system. And the clinical indications and adverse effects, you can only understand those things if you know the location of the receptors and their signaling mechanisms and types of receptors. The nervous system is basically divided into two main parts: the central nervous system consisting of brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is further divided into somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. As the name indicates, autonomic nervous system controls the automatic functions of the body or the involuntary functions of the body, and its efferent division is anatomically divided into sympathetic nervous system, which is also known as thoracolumbar system, and the parasympathetic system, also known as craniosacral system. The preganglionic fibers of the parasympathetic system, they arise from the cranial nuclei of nerves 3, 7, 9 and 10, and the sacral segment S2 to S4 of the spinal cord. That's why they are called craniosacral. Whereas the sympathetic preganglionic fibers, they originate in the thoracic and lumbar region of the spinal cord. Parasympathetic nervous system and sympathetic nervous system are the divisions of autonomic nervous system which control all the involuntary functions of the body, like they control the functions of the heart, of the lungs, different viscera, eyes, etc. Let's recall the anatomy of the autonomic nervous system first. So neurons in both the divisions, the sympathetic and parasympathetic, they originate in the nuclei in the central nervous system, which give rise to preganglionic fibers that exit the central nervous system from brainstem or spinal cord and terminate in the motor ganglia. These are the motor ganglia, from where the postganglionic fibers originate and they innervate the target tissues. Let's check out the relative lengths of the parasympathetic and sympathetic nerve fibers because you might get it in a multiple choice question. As the sympathetic ganglia are located in the paravertebral chains, so the preganglionic fibers of the sympathetic nerves would be shorter as compared to the postganglionic fibers, whereas the parasympathetic ganglia are located near the organ innervated, so the parasympathetic nerves will have a longer preganglionic fiber as compared to the postganglionic fiber. So what you need to remember is that the sympathetic preganglionic fibers are shorter than the postganglionic ones, and the parasympathetic preganglionic fibers are longer, whereas the parasympathetic postganglionic fibers are shorter. And now you know the reason for of them for being short or long. There are two types of nerve fibers, cholinergic or adrenergic nerve fibers, depending upon the neurotransmitter release. Acetylcholine is released from cholinergic nerve fibers and norepinephrine is released from adrenergic nerve fibers. So in this diagram, these are the preganglionic fibers. This is a parasympathetic ganglion. These are the sympathetic ganglia. This is adrenal medulla, which is a modified sympathetic ganglia. And these are the postganglionic nerve fibers. Now let's check out that acetylcholine is released from which fibers. Acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter released from all the preganglionic efferent fibers, whether it is a parasympathetic one or a sympathetic one, it will release acetylcholine. So it is released from all the preganglionic nerve fibers. Then it is released from all the postganglionic parasympathetic fibers. That's why they are called cholinergic fibers, right? So the nerve fibers supplying to the heart, smooth muscles, glands, they all release acetylcholine. It is also released from some postganglionic sympathetic fibers, especially the ones to the sweat glands. It is also released from the preganglionic fiber to the adrenal medulla and is released from the somatic fiber supplying the skeletal muscle. So all these nerve fibers secrete acetylcholine as a neurotransmitter. And norepinephrine is released from the postganglionic sympathetic fibers to the heart, smooth muscles and glands, and also from the adrenal medulla. After the release, the neurotransmitter will bind to its receptor and it will produce its action. The receptor would be activated and actions will be produced. Norepinephrine will bind to the adrenergic receptor and acetylcholine will bind to the muscarinic receptor. Normally, there is a balance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic system, but there are some situations in which the parasympathetic activity dominates, like in the situations of rest and digest, and in some situations the sympathetic system will dominate, like in fight and flight. Because we all know the sympathetic response is related to the fight or flight and parasympathetic response is during the rest and digest. So to understand the actions of the parasympathetic and sympathetic stimulation, just imagine a person lying in his couch watching television, eating popcorns and having a drink in case of parasympathetic system, and a person running away from a murderer, a kidnapper or a lion in case of a sympathetic system. Whatever will happen to the organs and the systems at that time, those would be the action of parasympathetic or sympathetic stimulation. So you won't have to memorize it, and you just have to make a clear concept. So let's check out the parasympathetic system first. So if a person is lying down, he is relaxing, he is watching television, his pupil will constrict. He'll accommodate for near vision. There would be cyclospasm because ciliary muscle is the one that is responsible for accommodation for near vision. And since he's relaxing, what will happen to the heart rate? There would be bradycardia, heart rate will decrease. What will happen to the cardiac output? It will also decrease because no extra oxygen or blood is required. Now coming to the digestive system, because this is also a system related to digestion, what will happen? All the secretions will increase, like salivation will increase, the gastric acid secretion will increase to aid in digestion, the intestinal smooth muscles will contract, defecation will occur, and in case of genitourinary system, the detrusor muscle will contract and urination will occur. These are the functions happening when a person is relaxing or he's eating, drinking, and all the secretions will increase, like there will be increased thermoregulatory sweating and there will be increased lacrimation. Now coming to the sympathetic nervous system, so when a murderer is running after you, what will happen to your heart? The heart rate will increase, there will be tachycardia, the cardiac output will increase because the person has to run and extra oxygen will be required for the muscles. What will happen to the pupil size? It will dilate and there will be loss of accommodation because the person has to look distant, he has to look for something to hide, so he has to look distant. And the does he need lacrimation? Of course not, it will blur the vision, so there would be decreased lacrimation, there will be decreased salivation because digestion is not needed at that time. It's not possible that a person is following you, he wants to kidnap you and you say, can I go to the loo? So no urination, no defecation, of course. The intestinal smooth muscles and the detrusor smooth muscle will relax. There would be bronchodilation. And what else? That's it. Rest of the actions we'll discuss them later on. So this is what will be happening in case of parasympathetic and sympathetic system. So you don't have to memorize each and everything, you just have to imagine these two scenarios in case of parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, and you would be able to write down the pharmacological actions of the drugs which act on sympathetic parasympathetic system, their clinical indications and their adverse effects as well. So you might be thinking that there are certain conditions in which due to excessive fear there is defecation and urination. Why does that happen? So that is called paradoxical fear. That is a situation when there is no way to escape. In that case, it causes massive stimulation of the parasympathetic system and there is loss of control over urine and defecation. That's why it happens. So the neurotransmitter released from the parasympathetic nerve fibers or the cholinergic nerve fibers is acetylcholine. So let's check out its synthesis, storage and release. This diagram shows the synthesis, storage, release and termination of action of acetylcholine as well as the drugs and substances which will block each step. This is the nerve terminal in which acetylcholine is synthesized. This is the synaptic cleft. This is the postsynaptic membrane. These are postsynaptic receptors. This is presynaptic receptor, also called autoreceptor. So for the synthesis of acetylcholine, the choline is taken up into the nerve terminal by active transport. This is the rate limiting step of acetylcholine synthesis and can be blocked by hemicholine. After entering into the nerve terminal, it combines with acetyl-CoA, which is derived from mitochondria and is produced by Krebs cycle and fatty acid oxidation. They combine in the presence of enzyme choline acetyltransferase and acetylcholine is formed, which is then transported and stored inside the storage vesicle. It is transported into the vesicle by vesicle associated transporter, which can be blocked by Visamicol. Then upon arrival of an impulse, the voltage gated calcium channels open. There is influx of calcium which causes the fusion of the membranes of the storage vesicle and the nerve terminal, and acetylcholine is released by the process of exocytosis. This release can be blocked by botulinum toxin, and the release is enhanced by black widow spider venom. It causes the release of all of the stored acetylcholine. The acetylcholine then diffuses across the synaptic cleft and activates the postsynaptic cholinergic receptors and the presynaptic receptors as well. This is an autoreceptor. It is like a guard which is controlling the release of acetylcholine. It is kind of negative feedback that the released acetylcholine will bind to this receptor, will activate it, and will inhibit the further release of acetylcholine. And the action of acetylcholine in the synaptic cleft is terminated by enzyme acetylcholine esterase, which breaks it down into choline and acetate, and choline is then again taken up by the nerve terminal for the synthesis of acetylcholine. Clear? So this is an esterase. I want you to write down that this is which phase of biotransformation reaction. It is phase 1 or phase 2 reaction, the breakdown of acetylcholine by acetylcholine esterase. This is the same diagram. This diagram is from Lippincott. You can also draw this one, but in this diagram the name of the enzymes is not written, so please write it down. So till now acetylcholine has been synthesized and released. So after the release it will act on certain receptors. Those receptors are called cholineceptors. You need to know their location and post-receptor mechanism. Cholineceptors are the receptors that respond to acetylcholine and other cholinomimetics. Cholinomimetics are the drugs which mimic the action of parasympathetic system. They are also known as cholinomimetics or parasympathomimetics. So cholineceptors are basically of two types, muscarinic receptors and nicotinic receptors. Muscarinic receptors again divided into 5 subtypes, M1, M2, M3, M4 and M5, and nicotinic receptors are divided into 2 subtypes, NM and NN. So all the muscarinic receptors are G protein coupled receptors, whereas the nicotinic receptors are ligand gated ion channels. You know there are 3 types of G proteins, GQ, GI and GS. So it is very easy to remember because M1, M3 and M5 are the GQ coupled receptors, and what will they do? They will increase IP3 and DAG. IP3 evokes calcium release from the intracellular storage sites and causes smooth muscle contraction. Therefore, they are increasing the motility of GIT and contracting the detrusor muscle, whereas DAG modifies the action of protein kinase C, which is an important enzyme in secretion. Now you can link this to the actions we have previously discussed, that because it is increasing calcium, it will produce smooth muscle contraction, and it is increasing DAG, so it will be increasing secretions. And M2 and M4 receptors are GI coupled. These receptors, they inhibit adenyl cyclase, decrease cyclic AMP synthesis, and they also activate the potassium channels. The nicotinic receptors, they are ligand gated ion channels, the sodium potassium ion channels, and they evoke action potential. Let's check out the locations of the cholinergic receptors. It is very easy to memorize. We have already discussed that muscarinic receptors are further divided into 5 subtypes, M1, M2, M3, M4 and M5. So all of them are located in CNS neurons. Clear? M1 receptors are basically located in the gastric glands, and M2 receptors are basically located in heart, and apart from it, these two receptors are also present in presynaptic sites where they act as autoreceptors and inhibit the release of further acetylcholine. Since M1 receptors are GQ coupled receptors, they produce or they increase diacylglycerol, and thus they will increase the gastric gland secretions. M2 receptors are GI coupled receptors and they are located mainly in the heart, so they will decrease the heart rate and force of contraction. M3 receptors are GQ coupled receptors, and they are located in exocrine glands, smooth muscles, and endothelium. So by increasing diacylglycerol, they will increase the exocrine gland secretions, and by increasing IP3, they will increase the intracellular calcium and will result in contraction of smooth muscles. And from endothelium, they will release the endothelium derived relaxing factor, which will produce vasodilation. We'll discuss all these actions shortly. M4 and M5 are mainly present in the CNS neurons, and M5 is present in the vascular endothelium of cerebral vessels as well. M4 is GI coupled and M5 is GQ coupled. So all the muscarinic receptors with odd numbers like M1, M3, M5, they are GQ coupled, and the ones with even numbers like M2 and M4 are GI coupled. So it is easy to remember. Next are the nicotinic receptors, which are of two types, NN and NM, and both of them are ligand gated ion channels. NN receptors are present in autonomic ganglia, in parasympathetic, sympathetic ganglia, and in adrenal medulla also. And NM are present at the neuromuscular end plates. Neuromuscular NM, so NM nicotinic receptors. Clear? You have to memorize this table because the types of receptors, their post-receptor mechanisms, and their locations are really important from examination point of view, and they are also important to understand the subject properly as well. Now let's discuss the actions of parasympathetic stimulation, and we know that the parasympathetic system is the system that is concerned with rest and digest. It mainly affects the GIT, genitourinary system, and the glands. Let's start with the eye. You often get a question about the parasympathomimetic action of certain drugs on the eyes, so you really should know that. First of all, we'll discuss the autonomic control of the eye, and then we move on to the parasympathetic system stimulation. So let's discuss the pupil size first. We all know that pupil has its natural intrinsic diameter, and the size of the pupil is controlled by two muscles, the sphincter pupillae and dilator pupillae. These are the muscles of iris. The dilator pupillae is also known as the radial muscle because of the radial fibers, and the sphincter pupillae is also known as the circular muscle of the iris because the fibers are circular. So whenever the circular muscle will contract, it will decrease the size of the pupil. This was the normal one, and now it has been decreased. The pupil has constricted, and this is known as miosis. And whenever the radial muscles will contract, they will produce dilation of the pupil. The pupil size has increased from the normal, and this is called mydriasis. So now let's check out the parasympathetic action on eye. First, we'll discuss the size of the pupil. This was normal, and we discussed that the circular muscle of the iris, it produces miosis, that is the constriction of the pupil. So the circular muscle of the iris, it is a smooth muscle, and it contains which type of muscarinic receptor? M3. And the radial muscle of the iris have alpha 1 receptors, which are sympathetic receptors. We won't be discussing them now. We'll just keep our focus to the sphincter muscle or the sphincter pupillae, circular muscle of the iris. So muscarinic receptors are present in the circular muscle of the iris. So when these receptors will get stimulated, the circular muscle will contract, and it will result in miosis. This was the normal, and this small size of the pupil is miosis. This is one action, parasympathetic action on the eye, that is miosis. The ciliary muscles of the eye, they also have muscarinic receptors, and these are the muscles which control the shape of the lens. The ciliary muscles are attached to the lens by suspensory ligaments. When the muscarinic receptors get stimulated, the ciliary muscles, they contract, and when they contract, they relax the tension on the suspensory ligament, which allows the lens to bulge more. It becomes more convex and accommodates for near vision. This is also known as cyclospasm. Whereas when the ciliary muscle will relax, it will taut the suspensory ligaments, and the lens will become flattened. Up till now, we have seen that parasympathetic system produces meiosis and accommodation for near vision by causing contraction of the circular muscle of the iris and the ciliary muscle. Now let's check out its action on intraocular pressure, but before that we have to see the synthesis and the pathway for the drainage of intraocular pressure. This is a very beautiful diagram from Minnie Katzen. Before discussing it, let's revise the structures of the eye. This is sclera, this is cornea, this is canal of Schlemm, which is a circular canal at the sclerocorneal junction, and it is responsible for the drainage of aqueous humor. This is iris, the dilator pupillae, which is radial muscle of the iris, and sphincter pupillae, the circular muscle of the iris. And the area between the cornea and the iris is anterior chamber, and the area between the iris and the lens is the posterior chamber. This is the ciliary muscle. This is trabecular meshwork at the base of the ciliary muscle, which is a spongy tissue that is responsible for the drainage of aqueous humor. This is ciliary epithelium. Aqueous humor is produced from the or synthesized from the ciliary epithelium, and it then moves in front of the iris through a narrow space, and it goes into the trabecular meshwork, and from there it exits via canal of Schlemm into the episcleral veins. So parasympathetic system basically improves the drainage of the aqueous humor. There is a disease in which intraocular pressure is raised, which is known as glaucoma, and due to that a pressure is exerted on the optic nerve and it might damage the optic nerve. So intraocular pressure is increased either by increase in production or in decrease in or impaired drainage of the aqueous humor. So in order to treat the disease, we have to use the drugs that either inhibit its synthesis or improve its drainage. So parasympathomimetic drugs which mimic the action of parasympathetic system would decrease the intraocular pressure and will help in the treatment of glaucoma. And how they do that, let's check out. The parasympathetic system decreases the intraocular pressure by the following mechanisms. By contraction of the circular muscle of iris, it pulls it away from the angle of anterior chamber. So in this picture you can see this is lens, this is iris, and this is cornea. So what it will do, the contraction of the iris will pull it away from the angle of the anterior chamber, and it will help in drainage of the aqueous humor. And secondly, the contraction of the ciliary muscles opens up the trabecular meshwork at the base of ciliary muscle. In the previous diagram we saw that the trabecular meshwork was present at the base of the ciliary muscle, and its contraction will open up the trabecular meshwork and it will help in drainage of aqueous humor. Next is that it increases lacrimation. So these were the four actions, parasympathetic actions on eye. Number one was it produces meiosis by causing contraction of the circular muscle of the iris. Second is it produces accommodation for near vision by causing contraction of ciliary muscle. Third is it decreases intraocular pressure, and fourth is it causes lacrimation. So you can get this question in exam, that write down the ocular actions of parasympathetic system stimulation. So these are the four actions. Next is the action of parasympathetic stimulation on the cardiovascular system, on the heart and the blood vessels. Since it is the system of rest and digest, it will produce bradycardia, decrease in heart rate. This is the normal heart rate. This is bradycardia, decrease in heart rate. So it will produce a negative chronotropic, inotropic and negative dromotropic effect. These terms are really important and you should know them. Chrono, from chronology, it means heart rate. Negative chronotropy decreases heart rate. Inotropy, force of contraction, it decreases the force of contraction, and dromotropy is conduction velocity, it is decreasing the conduction velocity. So it has negative chronotropic, inotropic and dromotropic effect. You know that M2 receptors are present in the heart and they are GI coupled, so they will activate the potassium channel. There will be potassium influx which will produce hyperpolarization and SA node depression, leading to bradycardia, negative chronotropic effect. Similarly, hyperpolarization in the atria will decrease the contractile strength, negative inotropic effect. And in AV node, hyperpolarization slows the conduction velocity, AV conduction velocity, negative bromotropic effect. Clear? Now their actions on blood vessels. As we have discussed that there is no parasympathetic innervation of the blood vessels, but the endothelium does have muscarinic receptors, the M3 type, and activation of these receptors releases endothelium derived relaxing factor, which is nitric oxide, and it causes vasodilation. Because nitric oxide stimulates guanylyl cyclase, it increases cyclic GMP and leads to vasodilation, which would decrease the blood pressure as well. Now their action on the respiratory system. M3 receptors are present in the respiratory system and their stimulation will produce bronchoconstriction, but it is of importance in the patients of asthma. In normal person it will be so minimal that it won't be even evident, and it also increases the mucosal secretions. GIT, the actions of parasympathetic system on the GIT are really important. Starting from the mouth, they increase salivation. And which type of receptors are present here in the glands, in the salivary glands? M3. They also increase the gastric acid secretion. Which type of receptors are present in the gastric gland? Those are M1. Clear? And it increases the tone and peristalsis and thus causes propulsion of intestinal contents. In the intestinal smooth muscles, M3 receptors are present and its contraction will propel the intestinal contents forward and can result in defecation. It can also produce diarrhea, and there is relaxation of the sphincters, of all the sphincters except the gastroesophageal sphincter, which is contracted. These are the actions on GIT. Next, their action on the genitourinary tract. The detrusor muscle has M3 receptor and its stimulation produces contraction of the detrusor muscle and the relaxation of the sphincter and causes voiding of urine. It increases the frequency of urination. The sweat glands have M3 receptors and these are the thermoregulatory sweat glands. In the apocrine glands, sympathetic receptors are present. So it increases the sweat gland secretion, it increases sweating. Now let's summarize the actions of the parasympathetic stimulation. First, on the eye, the contraction of sphincter muscle of the iris produces miosis and the contraction of ciliary muscle produces accommodation for near vision. Then on heart, it decreases the rate in SA node, negative chronotropic effect, decreases contractile strength in atria, negative inotropy, and decreases conduction velocity in AV node, negative dromotropic effect, and it has small effect on the ventricles. And in blood vessels, it produces dilation via release of endothelium derived relaxing factor. On the lungs, it produces contraction of the bronchial muscle and stimulation of bronchial gland secretion. The GIT, it increases the motility and relaxes the sphincters and increases secretion as well. The urinary bladder, it contracts the detrusor muscle and causes relaxation of the trigone and sphincter. And it increases the secretion of all the exocrine glands, the sweat, salivary, lacrimal and nasopharyngeal glands. So if you'll try to understand the actions and why these actions are produced because of the location of the receptors, their post-receptor mechanisms, you won't have to cram everything. And from this you can think about the clinical indications in which these drugs would be required, which are stimulating or acting like parasympathetic system, and what would be their adverse effects as well. You won't have to memorize each and everything. Then you only have to remember or memorize the name of the drugs. So if you want to remember their actions, there is a mnemonic known as dumbbells. D for diarrhea because they are increasing intestinal contractions. U for urination because it increases the contraction of detrusor muscle. Miosis by causing contraction of the circular muscle of the iris. Bradycardia, it is decreasing heart rate by acting on M2 receptors in the heart. It is producing bronchoconstriction by acting on the M3 receptors in the bronchioles. It produces excitation of the CNS, also emesis. Emesis is vomiting. It produces lacrimation by stimulating the lacrimal gland, salivation by stimulating the salivary gland, and sweating by stimulating the sweat gland. So it is increasing the all the secretions. So these dumbbells would be the adverse effect of the parasympathomimetic drugs as well. So that's all for today. Now is the quiz time. Please write down which drug is blocking the entry of choline into the nerve terminal. Just write one and write down the name. Then number two, which drug is blocking the vesicle associated transporter. And number three, which drug is blocking the release of acetylcholine from the nerve terminal. Now you have two MCQs. You don't have to write the statement of the MCQ. Just write down number one and its answer, and number two its answer. Which of the following is the primary second messenger process in the contraction of the ciliary muscle when focusing on near objects? Cyclic AMP, diacylglycerol, depolarizing influx of sodium ions, IP3 or nitric oxide. If you know which receptor is present in the ciliary muscle, M1, M2, M3, M4, M5 or NMNN, then only you will be able to answer it and what is its second messenger system. Nicotinic receptor sites do not include which one of the following sites, means nicotinic receptors are not present in which of the following: in the bronchial smooth muscle, in adrenal medullary cells, in parasympathetic ganglia, in skeletal muscle end plates, or in sympathetic ganglia. If you have any questions, you are most welcome to ask. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. You can write your question in the group or you can directly message me as well. I hope you have understood the topic well. Have a great day. Take care of yourself. Allah Hafiz.